the next paper is evolving controllers versus learning controllers for morphologically evolvable robots. I think it's Karine Miras.
Hello.
Hello. So, well, when you're ready, please.
All right, I'll start sharing my screen.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you.
Can you see my screen?
Perfectly. Thank you so much.
Cool. So I will, let me see just a second. Oh yeah, I had the video, but I don't want to use the video. Is my presentation being covered by the widgets from Zoom? Yep. No, right? I mean, covered in the sense of blocked. No, right?
I don't understand. Sorry.
Yeah. If there's nothing weird, then the answer is no.
It's fine. We can see it. It's good.
Yeah, it's fine.
All right. Thank you. So I'm Karine Miras from the Vrije Universiteit of Amsterdam, and I'm talking also about the evolution of robots. So I'm focusing mainly on questions regarding lifetime learning. And so if a robot has the chance to learn something during its lifetime, how does that affect evolvability, production costs, morphological properties, and the course of evolution itself? So a little bit of our experimental setup. In this particular experiment, we just use a flat environment, so just a straight floor. And the task is direct locomotion. Robots have to go to the right. And their fitness is the speed. So the fastest they go, the highest their fitness. Population size 100 for 30 generations. In all experiments, we are involving both morphology and controller. And our main comparison is having the capacity to learn with not having the capacity to learn. In both cases, they have morphology and controller evolving. So about the robot system, we work with the gazebo simulator, and we have a framework called Revolve that provides an extra layer for us. We work with modular robots. We have 5 types of modules. The main one, this yellow, you can see, is like the head, happens only once in a robot body. Then we have the blocks, the blue ones that are body extensions. Then we have the joints, the red ones. They are the actuators, the motors of the robots. And then we have the touch sensors, this gray one. For the controllers, we use neural networks, but we use some sort of hybrid. We do use a CPG, which means robots. Every oscillator for us is associated. Every motor is associated with an oscillator neuron. And here on the right, we can see this oscillators have a few parameters, but also there can be recurrence to these oscillators, and you can receive inputs from the touch sensors. So as for representation, we use an L system, and this L system is encoding both the body and the brain. Not going to go into details about the L system, but it's a system of rewriting. You start with a very simple component, which is called the axiom. This is the W you see here. And then you have an alphabet, which maps replaceable symbols to another group of symbols, which is in brackets. And so you started with one simple item. Let's assume the head of the robot. You think of the robot as an embryo, and this embryo has just a head. This is going to start, and then this is going to develop into something more complex. So this is what we see here in iteration 0, 1, 2, 3. There's a string developing into a more complex string based on these rules we see here. All of this is subject to evolution. Now, each one of these items are inserted in each one of these production rules are evolving. Then what we saw before is in this orange box was something we called early development. So growing from the head to a more complex string. And then we have one later stage we call late development, in which this string is translated into the actual body and brain of the robot. Here we have an example. The green box is the body, the morphology, and on the right, the red box is the controller, so the brain. So everything you need for the robot to be developed is encoded into the L system and is developed into these two processes. So for the lifetime learning, remember we have two types of experiments. So everything I said so far applies for both types of experiments, but this lifetime learning applies to only one of our experiments. And so what we do is to apply learning is that we take those, instead of just keeping those parameters as the L system provided to us, we adjust these parameters using an evolutionary strategy. And we do this for a maximum of 100 evaluations. So this means that instead of just going and living once, having one goal in its life, one goal in the sense of one attempt, the robot we have close to 100 attempts to be evaluated. And after each evaluation, adjustments will be made. And so these parameters will change. And this, so the means for the MIS will be initialized based on what the L system provided. But then from them on, they're going to be adjusted. And it's expected that the robot will become better, of course. Of course, if we want to measure any effects, we need measurements. We need descriptors. In this case, we have morphological descriptors. So for the body, we count size. That's pretty much about the modules, how many modules you have in your body. Proportions, self-explanatory. The number of limbs that a robot have, and the length of these limbs. We consider that a limb is one module that is connected by only one of its sides, one of its slots. So let's go into the results, comparing learning without learning. First thing we're going to look at is evolvability and production costs. So here we have the speed, which is the fitness across the generations for the evolvable robots and for the ones that were evolvable, but also were able to learn. The green one is the evolvable, and the other two are the learnable, but we just to give an idea, we broke it into two parts. So what it is before it learns, as soon as it's born, and what it is after all those iterations, so maximum 100 iterations of learning. So ultimately what we are comparing is the green with the blue, so evolvable with evolvable and learnable. The first thing we note is that the learnable gets a much better result in the end. In a way, that's not that much of a surprise, because remember, we are doing 100 more evaluations per individual. So there's great cost to get this better result. But another thing we see is that the result that the only evolvable robots get at the very end, very final generation, the same value is achieved. If you look at this black line, it is achieved in around generation 9 or 10. So 1/3 of the time, the learnable gets the same result. Again, at the cost of doing 100 evaluations, at 100 times more evaluations. So if you think of what we gain, in this case, for the learnable, we are doing 1,500 evaluations. And on the other side, we're doing 55,000 evaluations. If you are working in simulation, for us, if we are working in simulation, our evaluation would take less than 30 seconds. And this would be very expensive to do this learning procedure for 55,000 times. It would be very expensive. But on the other hand, here we have the same amount of robots being built if we would be in hardware. That's not our case, but considering robots that are being constructed in the real world to be evolved, in the case of only evolvable robots, you have to build 1,500 robots. And in the other case, you only have to build 550 robots, so like approximately 1/3 of the robot. So the main benefit here is that time and production costs. If you think that to build a physical robot, you would need, I don't know, at least maybe 4 hours in comparison to the simulation that you take 30 seconds. So in this case, we really, if we want physical robots evolving, this would be beneficial. But second thing we're talking about is morphological properties. And before I go into the results, I'd like to just provide a little bit of context. So mention why we were interested in that. So in previous experiments, we had been doing experiments and finding out that in this particular environment, so a straight flat plane, using our robot system, this is particular encoding, the optimal solution was having a snake. What is the snake? It's mainly a robot that has one limb or one active limb, not just like one tiny limb. They could have multiple limbs, but these limbs are really tiny, they're not effective. So pretty much one limb, usually straight, could be an L shape or not. And normally it rolls. So this is the behavior we see now. And those were the fastest robots that we had in many of our experiments and some of the papers we published. Then we thought, this was a bit unsettling because if you look at nature, you have so many patterns of locomotion and the fastest animals don't have just one limb. So we thought, wow, this is weird. So we did other experiments and using the help of novelty search, and also direct reward for limbs, we did manage to get limbs and a lot of diversity. So if you look at these guys here, they are quite diverse. They even, so their gaits look a little bit like animal gaits and even their shape. So this first one here, let me get back, looks a bit like a turtle. The one at the bottom like a salamander and the other one like a penguin. Oops, like a penguin. More in the gait than in the shape. So they can walk, they can row, they can do power stroke, they can boost. So very diverse strategies and similar to the ones that emerge in nature. So see, okay, that's not really a limitation of the encoding, that's not a limitation of the system. And later we found the answer for this. But before we found the answer for this, I was thinking, well, maybe having multiple limbs, although it's kind of obvious look in nature if the fastest animals have multiple limbs, but maybe if you don't have the chance to learn how to coordinate these limbs, this is actually counterproductive because then you have multiple limbs going to different sides and you end up, evolution ends up throwing away these solutions because they're not good. So what if they could learn? Maybe this would induce, would make limbs interesting for evolution. And that was not the case. Our intuition was wrong. That's what I'm going to show now. But in any case, just for your curiosity, we managed to solve this issue by making change to the environment. So we managed to induce limbs by, for instance, tilting the floor. So having the robot had to climb a hill. And this induced the need for limbs. And of course, if you look in nature, the comparisons we were making were not fair. I mean, the reason why animals have limbs is not just to locomote. There's so many things, other things you have to do. You have to care for your offspring, you have to collect food, you have to process food, you have to keep your body in an appropriate state for functioning. So many other tasks that go beyond locomotion. And so maybe this was indeed the optimal solution for this system. Okay, so let's look at the results. Comparing the 4 morphological features that I mentioned before, between learnable and not learnable, only one had a difference. And what we were focusing presented no difference. So we expected limbs, no limbs. We don't see any difference, no limbs, no difference in the length of the limbs, no difference in the proportion. The only difference is in size, and also contrarily to what we thought. So size is being exploited even more, and that's actually interesting. I'll tell you why soon. So here we have some, not really drawings, yeah, like representations of how these robots look. And we see that they're pretty much similar. They're pretty much snakes, so they're straight, or sometimes they make an L shape, but they have in general just one big limb. So what is interesting here is that for every one of these 4 morphological features, the exploitation of the features that make these robots fast, which is turns them into snakes, is happening earlier. So you look at size here, the blue one is the learnable one. You see that it exploits in size earlier, and this is true for limbs, this is true for proportion, this is true for length of limbs. And here on the right, we have the delta of learning, which is the difference between the speed when the robot was born, the very first attempt, and then the speed after it had the chance to learn for 100 iterations. And we see that it's not totally flattening, but after generation 15, it's much less steep. The gain that learning brings is much less steep. And if you look at the other curves, it's also around generation 15 that the other curves start like saturating and also flattening, because they have exploited as much as they could to have few limbs, long limbs, disproportional, and grow as big as possible. So you see that the search became really greedy for these traits. It was totally the other way around than what we thought it would be. So conclusions, lifetime learning does improve evolvability, reduce production costs, and accelerates good traits exploitation. That in a way is just the same thing as improving evolvability to some extent. A short video of the final results. So this is the evolvable ones, just as sloppy snakes rolling or kind of dragging around. So much less elegant gaits than the ones we saw before, but much faster ones. So now the learning one, they're just growing much bigger. Really, really exploiting size to just boost to the other side recklessly. So it's funny, if evolution had to choose between both, like to be elegant or to be efficient, they chose to be efficient. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much, Karine. Very nice presentation. So I think we have the time for at least 3 questions, maybe. So Emma Hart, can you read the questions, or shall I read it for you? Do you have access to the chat? Well, Emma Hart, she's asking, I might have missed it, but is the system Lamarckian? That is, do you write back the learned values to the genotype after the learning process?
No, we do not. We made a design choice to separate this, so it's not our question.
Okay. Then Bill Landon asked fitness best of 100. Well, he's asking about the best fitness of 100 trials. Last of 100.
Less, not sure I understand.
Me neither.
No, it's, yeah, not sure.
Okay.
Oh, no, okay. I think he means if you get something worse after a few iterations, do you keep what's worse or you get back? No, I think no. That you were just following the 100 iterations and sticking to it, not getting back to get what's best. No.
Then Dan van der Berg, he's asking. Well, he has a question about the L systems. But,
okay.
Can I ask it myself?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, great. Karine, can you go back to the slide with the Lindenmayer system, please?
Sure. Let me share my screen again. Sorry. Oops. Yes. Can you see it?
Yeah, I can see it. So this system, the third iteration, it represents a robot, right? Or
yeah, this is just a didactical example. So those are not how our own look. So I just wanted to make it simplistic because our commands are a bit long. But yes, it's didactically represented what a robot would be, but not exactly the ones we have.
Okay. So here's my question. This looks like a left recursive language to me, but you could, of course, use just any kind of language. But did you take into account that those the strings which you can accomplish by the basic elements that are in your Lindenmayer system, that they are all reachable, or at least equally possible reachable, so that all the configurations of robots in the configuration space are equally connected to one another? Do you understand what I mean? It's kind of difficult.
You mean if they are equally likely?
Yes. Yeah.
They are
equally likely reachable.
Yes, and the answer is no. We spent a lot of time on this, and we found that there's a bias in the search space, and that's a combinatorial issue. And that's a funny thing, because this thing of having one limb, this is a bias. But the selection pressure we see for these snakes is not only the result of this bias. So we have one paper that talks only about this and explores the space with novelty search, and we see, yes, there's not an equal chance for things to happen.
Because I was quite surprised that it converges already after 15 generations, huh?
Yeah, but so in the previous results, like the ones I showed you, they are more diverse. We are
Winnie, don't you have any?
Sorry, rewarding for speed and diversity in this morphological space, because we knew that there was this bias.
When I do this,
there's somebody speaking?
No, somebody's messing with the microphone.
Okay. But what we show is that we can fight this bias. We can tackle it if we want, if we put it directly into the fitness function. So we managed to do this. We get super diverse robots and fight this bias, but this robots become slower, 3 times slower.
Yes.
So yeah, it seems a genuine outperformance strategy to be a snake in this particular case.
I might have another question, but I'll give the floor to other people to give them.
Okay, thank you. Nice question.
So
allow me to finish with one single sentence what we got here. We hoped to get different shapes, not only those snakes all the time, and instead we just found that we get the same snakes but much faster.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, if all you have to do is roll around, go around, that's maybe the best way. And just because we don't like it that much, it doesn't mean that it's not the best way. Just because it doesn't look like us. We have limbs. We want limbs because we have limbs. But in a complex environment, a more complex environment, we did induce limbs. And we hope that making even more complex environments and tasks, we will get more complex morphologies and behaviors.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Karine. We have still 2, I think, rather comments of Emma Hart that says, I think snakes are a kind of low-hanging fruit for an L system. It might be interesting to try with a different representation, for instance, CPPN, to see if you get more interesting shapes. Sure. And then, well, we are gonna, I won't let you elaborate on this because we are gonna keep going, okay? And then Andres Faina, he says that I think that the flat terrain contributes to find rolling robots, mostly snakes. Well,
yeah, true too.
So thank you so much for your presentation and your answers. And